The Military Summary channel. On this video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, let's talk about Ukraine, about the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. During the previous 24 hours, he made lots of very interesting statements. A clearing separation is underway in Kupiansk. We will clear everything. The dates are set. We won't speak about them for now. The president of Ukraine made a number of statements regarding all sections of the front. Up to 60 Russian soldiers remain in Kupiansk. A city clearance operation is in progress. In Pokrovsk, Russia has had no success in recent days. There are currently 260 or 300 Russian soldiers there. Furthermore, the Liman direction, no changes. We see the situation stabilizing. The Dobropolye direction is difficult. Our operation continues. Russia is accumulating troops and preparing for revenge operation on this axis. So these are the statements that were made by Zelensky yesterday on the 3rd of November of 2025. But there is one important detail that I would like to point to attention. Right after Zelensky made those statements, the Rada deputy Bezugla said that Zelensky was lying about the situation in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. She said that now the president is openly telling lies about the situation in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, and you see if this lie were a deliberate information operation on his part, but decisions were made based on real verified information. But the thing is that Zelensky is basically lying. So this is the situation. So some sources are saying that the situation in Kupiansk is critical. Zelensky is saying that everything is under complete control. So let's start this discussion, the situation on the ground. And first, let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk to understand who is telling the truth, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, or the Verkhovna Rada deputy, Maria Bezugla. So right for now, you can see the current situation on the ground of the morning of the 1st of November of 2025. As you can see, we have a lots of icons, we have a lots of events, and we have a lots of changes. So let's discuss everything in details, and let's try to understand who is telling us the truth. And before we start, first let's compare the map between the dates. So this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of November of 2025. The Russians began advancing significantly in the northern part of the settlement. And by the morning of the 4th of November of 2025, the Russians managed to encircle completely the settlements of Mirnograd, Rovno, Svitla, so everything to the east of the city of Pokrovsk. So now let's discuss everything in details. As you can see, we have a lots of changes. Some of them were geolocated and confirmed. Some of them were just provided by different mappers. And first, let's talk about the settlement of Mirnograd, about its southern part. Several mappers reported that Russians continue advancing in this direction and that the Russians are approaching the southern Mirnograd citadel. We are talking about this territory with the high-rise building area. Furthermore, during the previous 12 hours, we received this video. And here we can see the Russian armored infantry fighting carrier that was entering the settlement of Mirnograd from its southeastern part. And in this very moment, we can see a few Russian soldiers that were moving in the southern part of the settlement, clearing one building after another. So these buildings were geolocated, and this is exactly the place where the Russian soldiers were discovered. So based on this video and based on the report of different mappers, we have adjusted the map. This is the situation by the end of the 3rd of November, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 4th of November. And the most important part of this video is that we don't see any resistance from the Ukrainian side. It seems that Ukrainians have already abandoned their positions in the southern part of the city of Mirnograd, and the Ukrainians are trying to stick as close as possible to the northern part of the city itself, with the purpose to be very close to the main evacuation roads. But it seems that these evacuation roads will not help Ukrainians for withdrawal positions, because according to this configuration of the front line, from now on it's impossible, and there is no more gap between northern positions and the southern positions, and it's impossible for Ukrainians to escape this cauldron. So before we start, let's compare the map between the dates. This is the situation by the end of the 3rd of November. The Russians just cut in pincers the northern Pokrovsk citadel. We are talking about this high-rise building area. And this morning we got reports that the Russians improved their positions significantly, and that's up to 20 or even 25% of the citadel were already captured and secured by Russians. So let's discuss everything in details. So once again, according to different mappers and according to different updates, the Russians managed to improve their positions. This information was confirmed by neutral mappers, and this information was confirmed by pro-Russian sources. As you can see, the pro-Ukrainian sources are still denying this information. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, during the previous nights, we received this video, and probably this is the most important video of the morning of the 4th of November of 2025. And here we can see how Russians were moving through the gas station in this region. So this is a gas station, or yes, this is a gas station, and if the quality of the video allows you, then you might see 2 or 3 Russian soldiers that were moving through the gas station in the direction of the northern citadel of the city of Pokrovsk. And as you can see, the Russians are moving very freely without being afraid of any attack from Ukrainian side with FPV drones. And the most important, the Russians were moving through the gas station without being afraid of being hit by Ukrainian snipers, let's say, from high-rise building area further to the north. So this video confirms several things: that Russians controlled the gas station when they were moving there, and that Ukrainian and that most likely buildings, high-rise building area or buildings further to the north, were also captured by Russians by the time they were moving there. And another important detail is the direction how the Russians were moving. So let's return back to the map and let's discuss everything in details. So this is exactly the area where the Russian soldiers were moving. And according to this video, the Russians were moving something using this direction. So they were moving something like this. So from the southeast in the northwestern direction. Furthermore, these 3 buildings were damaged, but the Russians weren't afraid of anything from this territory, which means that these 3 buildings also were under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And we believe that Russians were moving from the territory of this industrial zone. We believe that this industrial zone was also captured by Russians, and most likely those soldiers were returning back, let's say, to the mainland or to evacuation position after heavy clashes for this territory. As of now, we decided not to change anything in the area of this industrial zone, but we believe that this territory most likely was also captured by Russians. So based on the video, based on different mappers, we have adjusted the map. This is the situation once again by the end of the 3rd of November, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 4th of November. So we see that the Russians managed to not just let's say capture caught in pincers the northern citadel, but most likely the Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory. Furthermore, several sources reported that we should expect additional details from the territory of Rivne. Some sources reported that Russians have already entered the territory of the village, and maybe today we're going to start receiving the first updates. And this is already the territory to the east of the railways between the city of Pokrovsk and the city of Mirnograd. So this is a very important settlement. If Russians can capture the settlement, then Ukrainians have no chances, no complete chances for evacuation. Furthermore, we have lots of updates along TO 515 road and along the Olympijskaya Street. So this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of November, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 4th of November. So according to different mappers, mainly according to neutral mappers and according to pro-Russian sources, as a result of clashes and as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly along the Olympijskaya Street. The Russians managed to capture the most northern part of the settlement of Pokrovsk with its Zaporozhskaya and Rodinskaya streets, and the Russians managed to shorten the distance to the settlement of Rivne from the north and from the northwest. And currently, the gap or the distance between possible positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area is already less than 100 meters. So which means that there is no gap at all. It's just this, let's say, some specific thing of the map and of every single mapper who is, let's say, following the situation situation in the area of the special military operation. So, which means that the city of Mirnograd was completely blocked by Russia without any chances for evacuation. And this is exactly what the Russians were tasked for. They were pushing and pushing just with one purpose, to force the Ukrainians to fall back in the eastern direction, and the Russians were trying to force Ukrainians to concentrate themselves just on the territory of the city of Mirnograd. I'm not sure whether the Russians are planning to assault this part of the city of Mirnograd. Probably the Russians will push, but the main purpose of Russians is just to force Ukrainians to stay there. And then the Russians will start a trade they will try to make a deal with Ukrainians. What exactly the Russians will ask for these Ukrainian soldiers, we don't know for sure, but obviously Zelensky will be forced to accept most likely demands of Russia. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians also improved their positions in the northern and the northwestern parts of the city of Pokrovsk. The Russians basically currently are fighting for the city limits, for the border of the city of Pokrovsk in these directions. The Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours made lots of attempts with the purpose to counterattack, and they're trying to get and to stick as close as possible along the tree lines between Grishin and Rodinska with the purpose to maintain the evacuation corridors, but Russia controlled the situation. Of course, all these tree lines, all these possible evacuation roads are under complete and very heavy Russian fire. So even if anything can get these tree lines, these soldiers, units, vehicles, or equipment could be destroyed immediately with the Russian fire. So as we can see, the situation is very difficult. We see that there are less and less chances for Ukrainians to unblock the city of Mirnograd. Obviously, nobody is talking about the unblocking of the city of Pokrovsk. It's impossible already. Probably Ukrainians still have chances to unblock the settlement of Mirnograd, but I have some doubts about this. Anyway, based on these updates, based on these changes, we can make one and simple conclusion. Most likely, this morning, the city of Pokrovsk fell completely, without any chances for Ukrainians to be restored. So this is the situation, and this is the reality. We don't think that the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information in coming hours. There are still lots of groups of Ukrainians, lots of pockets of resistance across the southern part, across the eastern part, and so on. And obviously, it will take time for Russians before they will be able to finish the clearing operation, but it's just a matter of time, but not the matter of whether the Russians are able to do this or not. Now let's move further and let's discuss in details the situation in the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the city of Uspenovka. Additional changes on the ground were recorded. The Russians, as you can see, continue offensive operation in this area, and most likely in coming days, the Russians will finish the battle for this territory. The Russians will confirm this information as well. Furthermore, we received a very interesting piece of news from the territory of the city of Siversk. Today, several pro-Russian mappers adjusted their maps, and they provided us very interesting changes. So this is the situation by the end of the 3rd of November, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 4th of November. So the Russians are trying to tell us, the Russian sources are trying to tell us that as a result of offensive operation, the armed force of the Russian Federation managed to answer the city of Siversk itself from the south, and that the Russians captured the first street in this area. So this is a very important piece of news, because this situation means that the Russians began their major offensive operation in the direction of the city of Siversk. As you can see, the city is being stormed by Russia from the southern direction. So it seems that from now on, we're going to start receiving more and more updates from this area. And telling the truth, we don't believe that Ukrainians will show huge resistance. Most likely, Ukrainians during the previous days carry out counter-offensive operation in the area of the settlement of Yampol with the purpose to temporarily restore communication with the city for evacuation purposes. As for the Kupiansk direction, today we got additional details about Ukraine counterattack. Would like to remind you once again that Zelensky stated that there are just 60 Russian soldiers on the western bank. Ukrainians continue their counterattacks, but as for now, we're made just small changes between the villages of Radkovka and Mirova based on the reports that were published by different neutral mappers. So let's wait for additional details. Obviously, the battle for Kupiansk is going to be very difficult as well. And that's it for this short video. Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.